All right, so get this. You guys sent over the Philippine Judiciary's strategic plan, and wow, it's not just some boring legal document.
Yeah.
It's actually packed with some really ambitious goals and innovative solutions for something that I think hits home for a lot of Filipinos,
Right.
and that's access to justice.
It's a huge issue.
Yeah.
The World Justice Project, they found that only 20% of Filipinos who actually had legal issues were able to get any help at all.
Wow.
And when you look at the accessibility and the affordability of the civil courts, the Philippines ranks 84th out of 139 countries.
Yeah, those numbers are really alarming.
Yeah.
So what is it about this plan that makes it different from previous plans?
Well, they're not just, relying on the same old strategies. They're really embracing technology.
Okay.
Objective number one is all about enhancing public access to information and legal services. And I think the key here is moving beyond like the traditional face-to-face interactions.
Okay, I like the sound of that. I mean, using technology to make things easier, but how are they actually doing that? What are they doing? Like fancy websites or something?
Think even more accessible.
Okay.
Access to justice info sites, they're calling them, right, on social media platforms
Oh, wow.
in multiple languages,
Okay.
even local dialects.
That's really cool.
Imagine you're scrolling through your feed and there it is essential legal information
Wow.
right where you are.
Now, that is reaching people where they are.
Yeah.
But, not everybody's on social media.
Right.
What about people who maybe aren't as tech savvy or don't have access, especially in those more remote areas?
Yeah, they've got that covered too.
Okay.
They're planning on rolling out these AI-enabled kiosks at
Okay.
police stations and courts.
Okay.
These kiosks can walk people through different legal processes, explain fees, help them check on their cases,
Wow.
all kinds of stuff.
That's great.
Almost like a virtual legal assistant.
Okay, that's pretty impressive. So, they're making information more accessible. But what about actually getting legal aid? Like
Yeah.
getting a lawyer is incredibly expensive.
Oh, for sure. Legal aid is the cornerstone of a fair justice system.
Yeah.
And the plan definitely recognizes that.
Okay.
So Objective 2 really focuses on strengthening these legal aid initiatives.
Okay.
And they're taking a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
But one thing that really caught my eye is the focus on clinical legal education in law schools.
Oh, so like internships or something.
It's more like making it a core part of their education.
Okay.
By 2023, anyone who wants to take the bar exam will have to complete a clinical legal education program
Okay.
where they're actually getting hands-on experience providing legal aid services.
Wow. So they're not just learning about the law in the books, they're actually applying it
Exactly.
and helping real people.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That could have a huge impact, especially for those who can't afford a lawyer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's not just about pumping out more lawyers who've done some legal aid work. They're also going to hold a national summit to evaluate and improve all legal aid programs across the country.
Okay, so they're bringing all the stakeholders together.
Exactly.
Figure out what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
How can we make things better?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So they're really trying to get a handle on the big picture here.
Okay.
And speaking of the big picture, they're also taking a deep dive into the world of data.
Okay.
Objective 3 is all about the effective use of data in policy and decision-making.
Now, data might not sound as exciting as, these social media kiosks or mobile courts.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling this is pretty important.
It's absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to use hard data to understand exactly where the bottlenecks are in the court system, where resources are needed the most, and how to make the entire process more efficient.
Okay.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's a far cry from relying on, anecdotes or gut feelings.
Yeah.
This is about using data to make the system smarter and more responsive
Exactly.
to the needs of the people it serves.
Yeah, and they're giving the court management office, the CMO, a major role in this data revolution.
Okay.
They're going to train CMO personnel in data management, data analysis, and they're creating a centralized data warehouse to bring all that information together.
So they're not just collecting data, they're making sure that they can actually use it,
Exactly.
make informed decisions.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
It is.
But is it realistic? Can you really make this entire court system more efficient just by using data?
Yeah.
I'm a little skeptical.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think this plan is putting that theory to the test.
Okay.
And it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Now, if they're serious about making this justice system work better,
right.
they got to address those like frustrating delays
Oh.
and the lack of information that I feel like everybody complains about, right?
Oh, yeah. You read my mind. Objective 4 is all about upgrading information sharing within the justice system. And the key here is revitalizing the National Justice Information System,
Okay.
NJIS.
Okay, break that down for me. What exactly will the NJIS do?
Think of it as creating the secure and reliable platform
Okay.
where all the different agencies involved in the justice system can actually talk to each other,
Okay.
share information in real time.
So no more siloed information.
Exactly.
That's huge.
Yeah, imagine a police officer being able to instantly check if someone has an outstanding warrant, or a prosecutor being able to access case files from different courts without jumping through a million hoops.
Yeah, it's about making things easier.
It's about streamlining the entire system,
Yeah.
eliminating manual processes,
Okay.
getting the right information to the right people at the right time.
Sounds like a win for everybody involved.
I think so.
But with all this information share, what about data privacy? Are there safeguards in place to protect sensitive information?
Absolutely. They're not just opening the floodgates.
Okay.
Access to the NJIS will be strictly controlled. Data sharing will be limited to authorized personnel for very specific purposes. So it's about finding that balance between efficiency and security.
Yeah, that's reassuring to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's one more objective that we need to dive into, and I think it's a really important one.
Yeah. Objective 5 focuses on strengthening the foundation of Sharia justice,
Okay.
which is a crucial aspect of the Philippine legal system.
Right. And I understand that there are some unique challenges here.
Definitely the recent establishment of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or Bahram,
Right.
has highlighted the need for a Sharia justice system that can effectively serve this region.
So what's the plan to strengthen this system?
Well, for starters, they're creating a dedicated committee on Sharia justice to spearhead these reforms.
Right.
They're also going to conduct a really thorough review and assessment of the entire Sharia justice system.
Oh, wow. So top to bottom.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
really doing a deep dive.
That sounds pretty comprehensive.
It is, and they're not just relying on opinions or assumptions.
Okay.
They're actually planning some really interesting evidence-based studies, including one that looks at potentially expanding the mandate of Sharia courts.
Wait, what does that mean? Expanding the mandate?
So right now, Sharia courts primarily handle cases related to family law and inheritance matters.
Okay.
But they're exploring the possibility of giving them jurisdiction over criminal and commercial cases as well,
Okay.
potentially even outside of the Bahram region.
Wow. That is a big change.
It is.
But wouldn't that potentially lead to some conflict or overlap with the existing court system?
It's a complex issue for sure, and one that requires careful consideration.
Yeah.
And that's why they're approaching it with this research-first mindset, gathering data, having those tough conversations to figure out what's best for everyone involved.
Yeah. Okay. I can definitely see why this objective is so important.
Yeah,
It's not just about reforming the Sharia courts themselves.
right.
It's about making sure that they're integrated into the larger justice system
Ex-
in a way that is fair, equitable, and serves the needs of Muslim Filipinos.
It's a big task.
Yeah.
But this is just one piece of this incredibly ambitious plan.
Right.
It's impressive.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive so far.
It has.
We've covered so much ground from, tech-driven solutions to data-driven decision-making to the complexities of this Sharia justice system.
Yeah.
And we're only just getting started,
Yeah.
so join us for part 2,
Please do.
where we'll continue to unpack all the nuances of this plan and explore its potential impact on the future of justice in the Philippines.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back.
So we were talking about the Sharia justice system, right?
Yes,
And there were some pretty mind-blowing things in this plan.
there were.
So what else do we need to know about this? What else is in there?
Well, there's one more piece to that puzzle that we need to highlight,
Okay.
and it's updating the Sharia rules of court.
Okay.
So these rules are kind of like the instruction manual for how the courts operate.
Oh, okay. So they're dusting off the rule book and giving it a 21st century makeover.
Exactly.
Right.
Making sure these rules are aligned with current laws and the evolving needs of the communities that they serve.
Okay.
It's not enough to just, change the rules.
Right.
The plan also emphasizes the importance of training judges and court personnel on these updated rules.
Right. So it's like, giving them this brand new, like, high-tech car.
Yeah,
But you got to make sure they know how to drive it, too.
exactly.
Otherwise, it'd be chaos, right?
Total chaos, yes.
Okay.
And remember those evidence-based studies we were talking about?
Yeah.
One of them is looking at potentially expanding what those Sharia courts can actually handle.
Yeah. So, like, this idea of them taking on criminal and commercial cases.
Yeah.
Like, huge implications.
Huge.
That could really streamline things, I feel like, for Muslim Filipinos.
Yeah.
But it also kind of raises some questions.
For sure.
Right.
A lot of questions.
Like, how do you even ensure, like, a smooth transition?
Right.
What about potential conflicts with existing courts?
Right.
All
very important questions that the plan acknowledges and aims to address through research and careful planning.
That's good.
Yes.
It's reassuring that they're not just rushing into this.
Right.
They're really taking, like, a measured approach.
Right.
Gathering data.
Yes.
Having these tough conversations.
Exactly.
That seems to be a theme with this plan, right?
Yes.
They're really committed to using data.
Absolutely.
To make this entire justice system more efficient and more effective.
And a lot of that responsibility is going to fall on the court management office.
Oh, yeah?
The CMO.
The data wizards.
Yes.
The court system, right?
That's them.
They're going to be the ones analyzing all that data and turning it into some actionable insights.
Exactly. But it's not just about, crunching the numbers.
Right.
The plan also talks about training CMO personnel in data visualization and presentation techniques.
Okay, so data is only useful if people can actually understand it.
Exactly.
So they're making sure that the CMO can actually communicate their findings in a way that makes sense.
In a clear and compelling way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and remember that centralized data warehouse that they're building?
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be a game changer for the CMO.
So imagine having all of that data in one place, easily accessible,
right,
searchable.
Yeah, they'll be able to identify trends, spot problems, and develop solutions much more effectively.
Yeah, it's like you're putting together a puzzle.
Yeah.
And the data warehouse is the key.
That's a great analogy.
To put all the pieces together.
I like it.
Okay, well, speaking of connecting pieces, let's talk about the plan's focus on collaboration.
Yes.
And information sharing.
Yes.
The revitalized National Justice Information System.
Yes, the NJIS.
With the NJIS.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
But, it's amazing to me how many areas of life have embraced these integrated systems like healthcare,
right,
finance, even our homes.
Yeah.
It makes sense for the justice system to catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So with the NJIS, a police officer could instantly check if someone has an outstanding warrant.
Right.
Or a prosecutor could access case files from another court.
Right.
All in real time.
It's all about saving time and resources.
Yeah.
Preventing errors.
And reducing delays.
Right. And reducing delays, yes.
So everyone has the information they need to make good decisions.
Exactly.
But with all of this information flying around, what about data security?
Yes.
Data privacy. Like, these are big concerns.
They are big concerns.
Right.
And they've thought about that.
Okay.
The NJIS will have very strict access controls and data encryption.
Okay.
So ensuring that information is only shared with authorized personnel for legitimate purposes.
So it's about finding that balance
Totally.
between efficiency and security.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, stepping back for a moment, the sheer scale of this plan is incredible.
A lot.
It is. This isn't, just tinkering around the edges.
Right. This is like a complete overhaul of the Philippine justice system.
It's bold.
It is.
But it's also really inspiring to see a country taking these concrete steps towards this more just and equitable future.
And while there are going to be challenges along the way,
right,
I think this plan shows a real commitment to serving all Filipinos.
Absolutely. And it's not about, making changes just for the sake of change.
Right.
But creating a system that works for everyone.
Exactly.
Regardless of, their background, their circumstances.
Right. Everyone deserves access to justice.
Yeah. This has been an incredible journey so far.
It has.
And I can't wait to see what else they have in store for us.
Me too.
Join us for part 3.
Yes.
Where we'll wrap things up.
Okay.
And we'll explore what this all means for the future of justice in the Philippines. Welcome back to the Deep Dive as we wrap up, our exploration of the Philippine judiciary's strategic plan.
Yes.
I'm just really struck by how comprehensive it is. It seems like they're really trying to like tackle access to justice from all angles.
From all angles,
Yeah.
yeah. They're not just putting Band-Aids on problems.
Yeah.
They're really looking at the whole system and saying, how can we make this work better for everyone?
And one thing that really stood out to me was their focus on this like preventive legal literacy.
Yeah,
It's a fascinating concept.
it is.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's basically this idea that if you empower people
Okay.
with, basic legal knowledge,
Uh-huh.
it can help them kind of avoid problems in the first place.
So instead of waiting for people to like get into legal trouble,
Yeah.
you're kind of like equipping them with the tool
So tools, yeah.
and knowledge to actually navigate the system.
Exactly. Imagine if high school students had workshops on contract law or communities had outreach programs explaining property rights.
That's a great idea.
It could make a huge difference.
It's like that old saying, right? Like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly.
But even with the best laid plans,
Of course.
there are always challenges.
Always.
So what do you see as some of the potential roadblocks,
Yeah.
that they
yeah.
might encounter in trying to actually implement this?
Well, I think funding is a big one.
Okay.
Implementing all these different initiatives from technology upgrades to training programs.
Yeah.
It's going to require significant financial
But
resources.
especially in a country that, has so many competing demands
Right.
for their funds.
Right. But the plan recognizes this.
Okay.
And they're exploring different avenues for funding,
Okay.
including partnerships with the private sector
Okay.
and international organizations.
So it's a smart approach.
Yeah, I think it's smart.
I mean, it kind of sends that message that, this isn't just the judiciary's problem to solve.
Exactly.
It's a collective responsibility.
It is, and that's what makes me so optimistic about this plan.
Yeah.
It's a call to action for everyone.
Okay.
The government, the private sector, civil society, everyday citizens, to work together to create a more just and equitable society.
It's about, building that future where everybody,
Yeah.
regardless of their background,
Their circumstances?
feels confident
Right.
that they can access the justice they deserve.
Exactly. But, of course, the real test of any plan is in its implementation.
Right.
So will these reforms actually translate into tangible improvements in people's lives?
That's the big question.
That is the big question.
Yeah.
Will Filipinos actually feel like they have better access to justice?
Right. Will the system become more efficient, more transparent, more equitable?
We'll see.
That's what we need to keep our eyes on, right?
Keep watching.
So for you, our listener,
Yeah.
hopefully this deep dive has given you a glimpse
A good overview.
into the efforts that are underway in the Philippines.
Absolutely.
And we've seen how technology, data, and a commitment to inclusivity can be really powerful tools for change.
They can.
But the journey towards, a more just and equitable society is ongoing. And it's one that we can all be a part of. So stay informed, ask questions, and hold those in power accountable.
I agree.
That's the best way to make sure that this plan and the hope that it represents
Yeah,
actually becomes a reality.
absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving deep into the world of the Philippine judiciary.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And specifically, their plans for gender fairness and inclusivity in the courts. We've got this really fascinating document that lays out all their objectives. And get this,
Okay.
the Philippines actually seems to be ahead of other countries in the region when it comes to women in judicial positions, at
Oh,
least.
wow, that's great.
Yeah. But, is everything really as good as it looks? That's what we're going to try to figure out.
Right, yeah, it's important to look beyond just the surface level, I think.
Exactly. So, for our listeners, maybe you could give us a little bit of context. What are some of the factors that might have contributed to the Philippines' relatively high representation of women in the judiciary?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is their legal history.
Okay.
The Philippines has this kind of unique blend of legal traditions. You've got influences from Spanish civil law and American common law.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and in some ways, this blend has maybe created a more open path for women in law compared to some other countries that have stricter, more traditional legal systems.
That's fascinating. So it's not just a recent phenomenon.
No, not at all.
There's this deeper sort of historical context at play.
Exactly.
But let's get into the specifics of, what they're planning for the future.
Mm.
This document we have, it's like a roadmap for change. And it all starts with this thing called Objective 4, Gender Fairness and Inclusivity. So what exactly does that mean? What does that entail?
Basically, it's about ensuring that, court services
Right.
are truly inclusive and free from gender discrimination in all aspects.
That makes sense. I mean, everyone deserves equal access to justice, right?
Absolutely.
But how do they actually plan to put that into action? Like, it can't just be a nice sounding phrase, you know?
Right, it's got to be more than words.
Yeah.
And that's where these proposed activities come in.
Okay, so tell me about them.
Well, the first one is really interesting to me. They're developing guidelines for gender fair language and courtroom etiquette.
Wait, so they're literally making rules for how people talk in court?
Exactly. They're acknowledging that language has power, and the words we use can perpetuate biases or create a more respectful environment.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they're really thinking about how to create a space where everyone feels, valued and respected.
So, I mean, this seems like a pretty straightforward step, but is it really that big of a deal?
It's actually more significant than you might think. This is the first time that the Philippine judiciary is actually implementing its own set of rules,
Oh, wow.
specifically on gender fair language.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a real commitment to shifting the culture of the courts.
And that's so important. Okay, so they're tackling language. What else?
The next activity focuses on training. They're calling them gender sensitivity and inclusivity workshops.
Workshops. So, like with the new laws, like the Safe Spaces Act, right?
Exactly. That's a big one.
It's more important than ever for judges and court personnel to be sensitive to these issues.
Right. So these workshops are designed to give them the tools and the knowledge to handle these kinds of cases, appropriately.
Okay, that makes sense. So are we talking about just sitting through lectures all day?
Oh, no, no, no. It's much more hands-on than that. Think of workshops that simulate real-life challenges.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So participants will have to actually think on their feet and apply what they're learning, which hopefully leads to, real meaningful change.
That's cool, like a real world simulation kind of thing.
Yeah. And they're even considering bringing in experts from outside,
Oh, really?
from organizations like the Ateneo Human Rights Center, specifically their Urduja Women's Desk.
Wow, so they're really bringing in the big guns to get this right.
It seems like it, yeah.
So they're tackling language, they're upping the sensitivity training. What else is on their agenda for making a fairer system?
Okay, so the next one is especially interesting to me. They're creating guidelines for victim-sensitive courts.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I was wondering about that. So what's the thinking behind that?
Well, it starts with acknowledging a really difficult reality.
Okay.
We have laws to protect vulnerable groups,
Yeah.
especially women and children.
Right.
But the court process itself hasn't always been sensitive to their needs.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem.
Imagine being a victim of assault,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
then having to relive all that trauma in a courtroom that just feels cold and unwelcoming.
Oh, that's awful.
It's incredibly re-traumatizing.
So these guidelines are about making sure that the actual court process doesn't add to the trauma that victims have already experienced.
Exactly. And it's a real balancing act, right? You have to protect the rights of victims while still upholding the rights of the accused.
Oh, I see. So you mentioned earlier that the Philippines seems to have more women in the judiciary than some other countries in the region. But that kind of raises another question, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it's an important one. We need to look at, is that representation actually equal across all levels of the judiciary?
Exactly. Like, are women equally represented at all levels? Or are there hidden barriers preventing them from reaching, the top?
That's the million-dollar question.
And that's where their next activity comes in.
Right.
This deep dive into gender representation and mobility within the Philippine judiciary.
Yeah.
So what does that study actually involve?
Well, it's going to be pretty extensive. They're planning to analyze 15 years worth of data from 2006 to 2020, and they're going to be looking at judicial appointments across all court levels.
Wow, that's a lot of data.
It is.
So are they hoping to see any, trends or patterns in that data?
I think the big question they're trying to answer is, are there systemic barriers that are preventing women from reaching those top levels of the judiciary? We see more women in the lower courts, but as you go higher, that representation seems to drop off.
It's like they're trying to map the career trajectory of women in the judiciary and see where the roadblocks are.
Exactly.
So what about the Supreme Court? Are there any, gender preferences at play when it comes to appointments?
Yeah, that's going to be a fascinating part of the study. Looking at Supreme Court appointments in particular, it could reveal a lot about potential biases.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
I know, right? I've got so much more to unpack, including a fascinating award program and a deep dive into the idea of, feminism in the judiciary, but we'll have to save all that for next time.
Yeah, definitely. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the Philippine judiciary's plan for gender fairness.
Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into the Philippine judiciary's plan for gender fairness and inclusivity. This is really making me think.
Yeah, me too. It's like we started with these kind of simple initiatives, but the more we dig in, the more complex it gets.
It really is. And you know, that study on gender representation and mobility,
Right,
I'm
right.
really curious what they find.
Yeah, I mean, they're analyzing 15 years worth of data
It's a huge undertaking.
from 2006 to 2020, right?
Yep, and across LL court levels, we're talking about everything, from the municipal courts all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Wow.
By looking at the data over such a long period, they can, like, track the careers of women judges.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, we might see if there are certain points where women's careers stall out, or if there are types of cases that female judges are less likely to be assigned.
So it's almost like they're making a map of the obstacles, you know?
Exactly. And once they have that map, they can start figuring out how to remove those obstacles.
That makes a lot of sense. But, as important as data is, we also can't forget the human side of this.
Mm-hmm.
Numbers are one thing, but the personal stories, those are what really bring it to life.
Absolutely.
And that's where that Her Story Gender Award of Distinction comes in.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah. It's not just about recognizing individual achievements. It's about showing the, collective struggles and triumphs of women in the judiciary.
I love that. It's a platform to, like, amplify their voices, share their experiences, inspire the next generation. Can you imagine the impact of that on a young woman just starting her legal career?
To see these amazing women being honored like that, yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, it's about showing that the face of justice can be diverse. It's about changing the narrative.
But while this award celebrates the women who have, broken through those barriers, that study on representation will hopefully help us understand why those barriers exist in the first place.
Exactly. We need both. The celebration, the analysis. And speaking of analysis, let's go back to that study on feminism in the judiciary. This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Okay, yeah, remind me. This is the one that's looking at how societal norms, especially around masculinity, might be built into the legal system, right?
That's it. They're questioning the very foundation. Are the laws and procedures biased? Even unintentionally? That's the big question.
It's like they're challenging the whole idea of objectivity. Like, are legal systems truly neutral? Or do they just reflect the biases of the society they're in?
It's a deep question. And they're looking at it through a feminist lens, which brings a whole new perspective.
Okay, so how does that work? How does a feminist lens change how we look at the law?
Well, it's not just about the letter of the law. It's about the context, how it was created, how it's applied in real life.
I see. So they're looking at how these societal norms, especially around masculinity, might be shaping legal outcomes.
Right.
Are certain crimes against women, for example, taken less seriously?
Are
women's voices given equal weight?
all great questions. By looking at these subtle nuances, they can start to see where the system needs to change to really achieve fairness. Justice isn't just about following the rules blindly. It's about making sure those rules serve everyone equally.
It's about understanding the bigger picture. And, speaking of which, they're also focusing on gender-responsive laws.
Yes, those are crucial.
Are those laws really working? Are they protecting women, or do they fall short?
That's what this study will look at. It's about holding the legal system up to scrutiny.
It's ambitious, for sure.
Yeah.
But what if they succeed? What if they really do manage to fix these problems?
Well, then the Philippines could become a model for other countries. It could start a ripple effect.
Spreading these ideas to the rest of Southeast Asia.
And beyond. It's really exciting to think about. The world is watching.
It's a reminder that the fight for equality is never over. But with every step forward, we're creating a more just world. And now we're on to the final part of our deep dive. We've talked about the plans, the potential, but what would a truly gender-fair judiciary actually look like? Not just in the Philippines, but globally. Stay with us. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our look at the Philippine judiciary's plan for gender fairness. It's been quite a journey.
It has. We've covered so much ground. From specific initiatives like changing how people talk in court to these big picture questions about societal norms and how they affect the legal system.
Yet, it's one thing to have a plan on paper. But do you really think they can pull this off? Do they actually have what it takes to make these changes happen?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, the fact that they're doing these studies, gathering all this data, and looking at the system through a gender lens, that shows they're serious about figuring out the root causes. of the inequality.
It's like they're finally acknowledging that those biases exist.
Exactly.
But, like, awareness is only the first step. What comes after that?
Action. That's the hard part. They have to turn those findings into real reforms and challenge the way things have always been done. It won't be easy.
There's going to be pushback, right?
Yeah.
From people who don't want things to change.
Oh, absolutely. But I think the global focus on gender equality is creating a lot of momentum. And the Philippines isn't alone in this. Other countries are watching. International organizations, advocates all over the world. That kind of pressure can really make a difference.
So it's like they're setting an example.
Yeah. And if they succeed, it could inspire others to do the same.
Imagine that. This kind of ripple effect, spreading these ideas to other countries.
Throughout Southeast Asia and beyond.
The Philippines could be a real leader in this. Okay, so let's say, like, they do succeed. What would a truly gender-fair judiciary actually look like in practice?
Well, you'd see a more diverse group of judges at every level, courts that are more welcoming and inclusive, especially for survivors of gender-based violence. And the language used would be more mindful, no more perpetuating stereotypes.
That sounds great, but are there any, like, downsides? What about unintended consequences?
It's a good question. It's something they'll have to be very careful about. For instance, some people might say that focusing on gender fairness takes away from other priorities, or that it'll cause a backlash. They'll have to navigate those challenges.
So it's not a quick fix.
No.
It's a long process.
Absolutely. And that's why this deep dive has been so fascinating. We've really gotten to explore the complexities of this plan.
It's a reminder that the fight for equality is a marathon, not a sprint. It's not easy, but the Philippine judiciary's efforts give me hope that a more just world is possible. So to all our listeners out there, what can you learn from this? And how can you, as individuals, help create a more gender-fair world? No matter where you live, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for progress. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.